Hi guys, in this video we are gonna see how we can spin up a Jenkins container and how we can give it the access to our Docker daemon which is on our local machine. So when I started learning Jenkins, I used to install it locally in my system, but it was not a smart use of resources. And then if you want multiple versions of Jenkins installed on your system, it was a pain in the ass. If you have a technology like Docker, so why install things on your local machine? So the agenda of this video is this: I will give you a small introduction of Docker and Jenkins. I'm assuming you know it very well. Then we will move and spin up a Jenkins container. Then we will see that why we want to access Docker within that container. And then we will see that how we can use volume to get Docker access within that container. So let's get started. So let's start with what is Docker. So Docker, it's a must-to-have tool for modern software development. Docker simplifies app development and deployment with lightweight containers, and these containers just bundle apps and their dependencies, ensuring consistent run on any system regardless of what operating system you are on. So it just make our life very easy, and we can just ship our app and its dependencies into a single container, and we can just ship it to anyone, and he can or she can just run that container, and that app will run on its system without having any dependencies issues. So if we talk about Jenkins is an open source automation server for continuous integration and delivery, which is also called CI/CD in software projects. It basically helps developers to build, test, and deploy code automatically. We can automate the whole process of CI/CD pipeline. We can automate the whole process of software development lifecycle using this tool. Now let's move towards how we can spin up a Jenkins container. So let's get started. So in order to spin up a Jenkins container, I have opened the Docker Hub official website, and on searching on Jenkins, I got this result, and on opening that result you will get a link to its documentation. There is a detailed documentation and you can search for anything you want from here. We just want this command, and what basically this command is doing, this command is running a Docker container out of a Docker image. And what we are doing actually is to it's running the Docker container in a detached mode, and this minus v flag is for mounting volumes, so it's just mounting Jenkins home. So those who don't know about Jenkins home, it's basically where Jenkins store everything. Now this minus p flag is for exposing port. So we are exposing two ports. One is 80,080, on which we will access Jenkins, and this 50,000 port is used by Jenkins master node. So we will copy this command and we will go and open our terminal. In that terminal I will paste this command and I will name it custom Jenkins. Actually, I'm naming the container, and you can see that my container is now running. In my case, it didn't take the time, but in your case, it can, because in my case, this image was already pulled. So I can go to my Docker desktop and I can see that the image is already pulled, and now we have a container. So now if we go to our web browser and run localhost 8080, you can see now we can access the Jenkins. So this Jenkins is running on our container. But now there is a problem. The problem is if I go and run docker exec it custom Jenkins bash. So now you can see that I'm in my container, and now if I run and try to execute Docker, so Docker is not found. But if you have used Jenkins, you should know that in order to make freestyle jobs and all that pipeline, you sometimes have to build images. So you need an access to a Docker. But how we can access our Docker, which is our on local machine, in the container? Now let's look at it. Now there is a thing to understand. There are two most important components of Docker. One is Docker daemon and one is Docker CLI. Docker CLI is the interface through which we interact with the Docker, and Docker CLI actually give commands to Docker daemon, and Docker daemon is responsible for everything. It manages the images, it manages the container, it manages each and everything. So now what we will do, we have a file called docker.sock, docker.sock. It's actually a socket through which Docker CLI communicates to Docker daemon. So now what we will do, we will volume mount that Docker socket file to our Docker container. So now Docker container have access to that Docker socket file which is on our local machine. Now the second most important part is to install Docker CLI on our container, which we will do. So in this way, our container will have access to Docker. Moving forward, we will run this command, and this is the same as the previous command, but now it is also mounting this Docker socket file from this path to this path within that container. So now if I run that, you will see that now I have run a container on which this Docker socket file is also mounted. So now what I will do, I will run docker exec it. This time I want user root, and I will go and run custom Jenkins bash. So now I am in that container as a root user. Now I will run this command. So what this command is doing, this command is installing the Docker script into this file, and now we are giving it all the access because we are the root user, so we can give that file access, and then we are using that script to install Docker. You can see now Docker is installed. Now here I am getting this warning because I am on Windows and it is recommending me to install Docker desktop, but it's fine. And now if I go and run Docker, you can see that it's now giving me all the privileges of my Docker. So now I am accessing Docker within the container. You can see that I am inside the container. So most of the time when I am spinning a Jenkins container, I create this image. So when I am creating this image and then running a container out of that image, so I don't have to go inside that container and install Docker manually. So I hope you understand the concept of how we can access Docker from the container. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video. If you have any query, comment down below and subscribe the channel to get the latest update about software development. Happy coding.